Once you have your handles squared up, you can go ahead and start doing the roundover, and the roundover or the cove. And if you notice on your plans, it gives you the dimensions of where it all needs to be. So you should have both your handles done at the same time. They should both be the same length and the same width. If you notice this handle, I've already done it as an example, just to kind of show you what we're going to be doing. We have a roundover on 3 edges here, and then on the back we end up having the cove, and that's going to be where your fingers go for the box. Okay, so I'm going to start with the cove bit, which makes the finger holes. And if we notice on our plans, it's 1 inch in from each side. So I'm going to go ahead and first I'm going to locate my back and which one is going to be the bottom. Okay? So it's kind of a personal preference. This one doesn't really make much of a difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up making this side here, this face I should say, this face the back, and this one the bottom. Okay? So if we look on our plans, like I said, it says 1 inch in from each side. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 1 inch in. Okay. And also on the other side, I'm going to take a square and make my line. And what this is going to tell me to do is this will say where the cove, the area in between, it'll tell me where that bit needs to be, or where that router needs to go. So here we can see that I have 1 inch in from each side. This is my bottom edge. If I want to, I can place a little X, and I'm going to end up routering from here to here. Okay, so in between these 2 marks, and you'll be graded again on how close you can get to those 2 marks. I've already kind of set up the jig here, and all you're going to do is take 2 wooden clamps, clamp one to the table, and then you're going to clamp your other piece in here. Okay? So when we're clamping this, you want to make sure that the piece is elevated above the clamp and sticks out further past. Right? And the reason why we end up doing that is so that if it was below the actual faceplate of our router would not be able to fit in between here. We'd only be able to router about 1 inch or so. So we want to make sure that we have the face of our handle up above the jig so that we can glide all the way across here. And we want to make sure it ends up sticking out past so that we don't end up routering the actual jig itself. Okay? So when I have students use this, what we do is again, we're going to clamp down to the table, and you want to make sure that the face of the router ends up being flush with it or in contact with it, and it's not at an angle. Okay, so a big mistake is that kids will want to end up kind of tipping this over. Okay, but we want to make sure that it's flat on the face of our handle. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to push it in until this bearing here rides along this edge. Okay, and you'll be able to tell when that happens because you won't be able to push in any further. I'm going to start about closer to the left-hand side, and I'm going to just barely work back to the line, and then I'm going to take 1 pass all the way to this line here. If you end up getting it so that it's not quite to the line, you can always go back and kind of wiggle it a little bit closer to the line. So remember that you can always take off more, but you can't put material back on. So I always tell too, if it helps, to kind of get down and see what's actually happening. So here's my line. I'm going to end up looking through the throat of it. I'm going to turn it on, I'm going to press it in, kind of work back just a little bit to that line, and then take it 1 quick pass all the way to the line on the right-hand side that I made. Okay, so if you notice, I waited until the blade stopped or the bit I should say, stopped rotating before I took it out. A lot of times what happens is people end up getting anxious and they'll kind of pull it out at an angle and it'll end up actually chipping your wood. Okay, so if you notice, I routed up to those 2 lines here. Okay, so that's all I need to do for the Cove. I would do that for both my handles. Now what I need to do is do a round over. And if we look at our plans, the round over is only called for on 3 edges. Okay, and we're not going to router this bottom edge here because there's not enough material for that ball bearing to catch on. Okay, so here's the Cove that I had. This surface here is going to be against my short side. So what I'm going to end up doing is routering each end and the top edge. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to set that up here, and the clamp, making sure that it's above my clamp and sticks out past that. I'm going to grab the other router. Okay, so again, it has a round over bit in there, same thing, and I'm going to start from one edge and work to the other. Again, making sure that the face of it is flat on the face of my handle. Start. Okay, so if you notice here, I have my round over all the way at the top. I have a little notch where I missed the end, but that'll be okay because when I end up doing this edge, I can come back and round that over. Okay, so I'm going to loosen my jigs. Close this up. And again, I want to make sure that my clamps stay parallel. Alright, same thing, I'm going to clamp this down to the table so it doesn't move. And again, all I'm going to end up doing is doing a round over on my handle, or my edge, I should say. Okay, so if you look again, I missed my corner. Now I want to make sure that I don't end up rounding over and going back this way. Okay, so I want to pull it straight off the side. Okay, so I have this edge all done. Now all I'm going to do is flip this around and do the same thing that I did on this edge over here. Okay? If you have some burn marks again, and there's going to be probably a little ridge there, you can sand that off. Again, 120, 180, then hand sand with 220.